This happened only 2 months ago. I work at a retail store in my hometown as an overnight employee. I do all the regular things like stocking shelves and taking inventory and sometimes unloading late arrival trucks. The occupation is very chill, being that I normally work alone or with another individual, so no one is there to supervise me around all day. On this night I was distant from everyone else until 4 a.m. Had a lot to do over the course of an hour. I was in the slides the whole time, not needing to go to the back room for anything, but around 11:30 I thought I heard something from the back. I strolled down to the furthest limit of the ASL and checked out, then went into the stockroom, and right as I entered there was a knock on the back door. The door was only used for truck drivers when delivering a load, but I was never notified about any deliveries. This, however, late evening being an enormous metal entryway, there was no peephole or glass or took out and I'll see who it was. I strolled over the conveyance cove, furthermore opened the carport just to brake, and similarly, as I'd expected, there was no truck. I, however, was nearly trusting there would be, because now I was really skeptical as to who was knocking on the back door in the middle of the night. A few minutes went by, no more knocks or sounds came from the door. I even squeezed my ear against it and attempted to tune in. However, I was almost certain whoever had been out there was no more presently being interested and marginally moronic. I made the way for ensure no one was still outside. I looked out into the dark carport running behind the structure. There were no cars, no individuals, and not indeed even any sounds. It was simply empty and quiet. Seeing this and thinking back to the loud knocking, I left a shiver go through me and I closed the door. I walked back to the ASL I was in before and tried to get back to work without worrying too much through the next couple hours. I went in and out of the back room several times, but never heard anything else. It was 2 a.m. by this point, and I was wrapping up loading one of the center ASLs when a very calm yet consciousness sound came from the back. It was metal door clicking close. My face went white as I froze up. I heard nothing else except for I realized I needed to be aware of it. I strolled abruptly, as yet it's tuning it, as I moved toward the secondary passage from the beginning. Checking out the stockroom, I saw nothing, so I advanced further in and toward the back door. It was closed, and being that it only opens from an inside, I was just confused, trying to think of what would have happened. I turned and looked down the hall of lined up boxes when I saw a figure facing me. He stood at the end of the hallway, seeming to have just rounded the corner and not expecting to see me. But after a short moment of shock, the man started sprinting at me. He was enormous and scaring, with a look of outrage in his eyes. As he came barreling down the hallway, I ran for the door and into the grocery aisles, trying to make it to the front of the store. The man's footsteps coming up behind me were horrifying, but by the time I got to the front, the footsteps had stopped. I pulled my keys out and unlocked the door, and as I shoved the door open, I looked to my side and saw the man standing at the end of the aisle, just watching me. Without hesitation, I ran out into the parking lot and into my car. I ran away from the shop at full speed and headed home. But it wasn't a few minutes later that I felt that a car behind me was chasing me. So I immediately called 911 and informed them. 2 policemen immediately arrived on the scene. First around the house, they checked me and looked around the neighborhood. Finally, they searched the store, but no one was there. The strange thing was that no one was there. Everything was going on like the movies. I still don't know who that guy was, and then after 2 months, I still haven't seen him. But I am afraid that he will come back one night. This happened back in August 2023. My name is Henry and I'm 13 years old. I had won the top school, so my father had promised to take me and my younger sister Alice on a trip. but my mother couldn't come with us because of her busy schedule. So, in the later months of summer, I went camping with my father and Alice, which we were planning to do since before summer started. We were traveling to a locally known campground, and we planned to remain there in a trailer that my dad's possessive. We left around 6 p.m. Since the drive required close to 19 minutes, and since the campsite was way out on the sticks, obviously, when we arrived, we stopped in the parking garage outside the lunch region and took our rents, snacks, also other setting up camping necessities. The trailer was situated in an enormous clearing in the forest, and it's really a very pleasant trailer. It's generally new and has a ton of room, and it has living room, a mini kitchen and a bathroom, and even 3 bedrooms. The sun would shine greatly in the clearing, creating some nice scenery for photos. On the first day, everything went normal. Me and my sister spent a lot of time watching TV. My father took photos of the area, and us we had a very nice dinner. Since my father is a wonderful cook, however, everything went downhill quick on the second day. It was a shady day, yet it wasn't coming down, which we were appreciative for. There likewise scarcely any creatures lurking in the region. I saw a deer and perhaps a couple birds, however, that was about it. Alice figured there may be a hunter in this space. Quick setting to the night. We are perched by the waterway, which was a 30-second stroll from our trailer. My mom was recounting to a boss story that I can't exactly recollect. When all of it dropped, he heard a few sticks breaking and leaving stirring from the opposite side of the river. "Hey, is that a bear?" Alice asked. I heard a slight amount of fear in her voice when she said that she is afraid of bears, but my mother said the sounds were too light for a bear, so I thought it might be a deer or something. That's when we heard the most blood-curdling shriek of any of us have ever heard erupt from the other side of the river. I could feel the air on the hair of my neck, and stand up. Alice bounced back in the dread that shouted tingle my cerebrum in a way I would never depict it. So human yet so animal, like this an equivalent time every one of the 3 of us got the damnation out of there and ran back to the trailer. The entire time, hearing shouting coming from the stream. As we were running, we immediately assembled our possessions, stuffed them in a huge gym bag that we had taken, and ran back to the vehicle. At the point when we broke free and clearly bounced into the vehicle, looked the doors and took a deep breath. What the hell was that? Alice exclaimed. None of us could even begin to explain what we just heard. We just agreed to go back home and forget the whole thing ever happened. We pulled out of the lot and drove down the road back home. I chose to look one final time at the forest when we were heading out, and I promise to you what I saw. I frightened me. I saw a tall, dark figure with shining white eyes simply gazing outside the edge of the timberline, checking out right me, as it shook me profoundly, and I haven't had the option to disregard the picture. Since it's October 18th, presently, at the time I'm writing this, I still haven't told Alice or even my mother about what I saw. My father went up to the trailer to see what they could find though, and he found his trailer practically it ruins. I don't believe in skinwalkers or the paranormal or anything, but what happened to the campground definitely changed my mind a little about some things. My dog Charlie was a very sweet loving dog and also trained to be a service dog for PTSD. Before he lost his leg, I've never seen him get aggressive with anyone in the entire 4 years he lived. He never growled or nipped at anyone. He loved all people and was a real gentle giant among our little terriers. What I'm getting at here was that his barking at something and being aggressive was so wildly uncharacteristic that I only saw it once at the time I was 14. I was at home with my 2 younger siblings. My dad was at work and my mom gone out to the grocery store to grab a couple of things. For the reference, we lived in a 2-room trailer in the forest on an impassed street. At the point you truly need to try to get down our street track down our home, explored down our dilapidated carport, and tracked down the door. I was sitting at the computer watching YouTube videos when all of a sudden two of my smaller dogs perked their heads up, barked a few times, and started investigating down the hall. The siblings were resting in the room toward the finish of the corridor at the point, so I calculate that they got the dog work up. However, at the point Charlie unexpectedly stood up on the couch with her ears levaned up, his fur ascended on her back, and his tail was straight up. Then he started barking very loudly. The bark boomed through the living room and echoed around all of a sudden. He lunged off the couch and tore down the hallway. I was already anxious on the grounds that it was in a real sense. Whenever I'd first heard his bark, he's Ben Seiji blend, so his bark is even more a bang solid. Yet, this is a large, noisy alarm. Barker stood up and went to look prepared to ward off what I was accepting for the time being that was a shadow beast in the passage, in a view of how the Kennys were acting. But then I heard that someone was knocking on the front door. We rarely ever had visitors because of how weird our house was location-wise, so my 14-year-old mind had no clue what to do here. The specialist, the consideration of the dogs, and they came running down the passage, all with the exception of Charlie, and I felt better with our 3 happy dogs in the room. With me, even if they were all the size of New York City rats, I opened the door just a bit, and standing on our porch was the sketchiest man I think I've at any point seen. I can in a case picture him impeccably. Everything about him seemed a little too shallow. His clothes were nice, but they just seemed off. He was wearing a clean, fresher looking shirt and pants, yet he had what looked like a suit coat, and his garments were all dull too, in spite of the way that it was the summer in Texas and the weather conditions was most certainly in the 100s that day. He also had this plan on ballot Bible in his hand. It looked like the label had been covered up and tapped over. I stared up at him in confusion because I definitely didn't know this man, and I asked what he wanted. He grinned at me, yet it looked concentrated and counterfeit. It most certainly looked misrepresented. Then he talked in a similar voice to his rap, or on the other hand, retail laborers do. He expressed, "Greetings, kid. I'm attending to sell this rug cleaner here," and he shook the jug at me, mind assuming I come into the shadow. "You, how great it works. Alarms are going off in my head. How? Because you just seemed so off looking back with an adult perspective. The fact that he didn't ask if my parents were home in unavailing scenes. He presumably realized that they weren't, and that is the reason he was there in the first place. I ought to have advised him to get out properly, or that I need to get my mother hour. I didn't. Instead, I just shook my head and said, "No. We don't have carpet while it works on the other things," and he took a big step towards the door and shook the bottle at me. I started to freak out, realizing our front door didn't even have a lock, so closing the door in the sky would have been useless. As of now, I was scared as my brain raced, attempting to choose what to say and do that point. When out of my however, I heard Charlie had crawled up from the corridor, brought down towards the ground with his teeth banished, and it was a true growl like a parrot. He had slobber dripping off from his mouth, his ears were down, and he was ready to pounce. The guy heard it too. As I looked towards Charlie, he tried to lunge past me and attack the guy. He freaked out and ran off the porch without another word, booking it down the driveway. Meanwhile, my father came back from work and fought with them and chased them, and they ran away to the middle of the road, and they ran away from our eyes. The second he disappeared, Charlie's entire body language changed, and he went back to being the sweet dog I knew. He laid back down with his mouth and throat covered in slobber. I realized my siblings were still down the hall, so I ran a check on them. When I got to the bedroom, my siblings were still sleeping. My relief quickly faded at the point when I took note that the room window was totally open. The drapes were undeniably pushed aside. Furthermore, the things on the dresser before the window were moved around. I felt quite skeptical. To me, that somebody attempt to move in through the window. From what I could assemble, the room entryway was apparent from the sofa, where Charlie was dozing, so I think was trying to climb through the window. They definitely didn't accept Charlie, a bigger dog, because most of the time he was inside with me. Our smaller dogs were outside more often, but still, I don't know what their exact intention were that night, but I am glad I never had to find out.